many young generations who believe in God, there's some laws in Bible, and sometimes they like discouraged because they have some sins.
Mm-hmm. Right.
For example, like they like have a kind of
Yes, relationship with one another. Yes, before marriage. Yes, yes.
They even they kind of like I saw many sisters who are suffering from that kind of guilty,
right, right.
And how to comfort
and counsel people like that. Yes, what should
I think many people, young generation in Western or Europe,
anywhere, Korea, Japan, China, wherever people live. Well, I have a chapter in my book about that exact issue. It's not something that I can openly and loudly teach in church circles because there are a lot of conservative Christians who just cannot imagine making any compromises to tell people, young people, God understands you, God understands you, and God doesn't blame you. To make that kind of statement sounds too much like condoning it and compromising the Word of God and the commands of God. And so there is a real conflict, not just among young people, but also among Christian teachers, ministers, everyone. It's not just young people's problem, but it's everyone's problem. It has to create a problem because that instinct is in all of us. It's not just lust, it's not just desire, it's deeper than that. It's a basic instinct that is in the basic core of all human beings. The basic instinct is to survive and to procreate. It's a very fundamental, animalistic instinct. If humanity did not have that instinct, humanity would have gone extinct. They would have died off. So the first thing, the very first instinct for human beings is to eat. Second is to procreate, to have children, to keep the race. And where does this instinct come from? From God. God commanded, be fruitful and multiply. That was the command given by God to Adam and Eve. And since then, all people are born with this very basic instinct to be fruitful and multiply. And the moment a person enters puberty, and when does it take place? 11, 12, 13, very early age. The moment they enter puberty, they open their eyes to human sexuality. From that moment on, they are curious about it, interested in it, and they desire a partner. They look for a partner from puberty. And if we strictly impose the law that says no relationship, no intimacy before marriage, and when do people get married? These days, 30, 31, 32, 35. For guys, maybe 28, 29. For women. So you enter puberty at the age of 12, and you get married at the age of 30. That's 18 years of waiting. I'm just giving an example. I'm just giving a hypothetical example. That's 18 years of waiting and even to consider, even to have that desire, that lust, whatever you call it, sexual desire, if church regards it as sin, that's being very unrealistic, becoming very anti-human, against the common sense, and it just doesn't work. I've seen it in my own life, in the lives of other people. I've seen it imposing the law, saying, oh, if you just even fantasize it in your mind, it's sin. Well, that makes all human beings sinners. That makes everyone who is alive and who is true to his or her basic instinct a sinner. That does not work. If the words of Jesus Christ, have to be interpreted that way, it may be a correct interpretation, but that kind of interpretation does not help anyone. It does not help anybody to come closer to Jesus. It does not help anybody to believe in the love of God. It doesn't help anybody to believe that he is a marvelous creation of God, made in the image of God. That person will be guilty. He will feel bad about his nature. He will feel that he's dirty, he is unholy and unspiritual. So, I'm sure that Christians have had this question from the very beginning, not just now, not just in the 21st century. Christians must have had desperate questions about this issue from the first moment, but they kept quiet about it. Discussing human sexuality in the church circle was almost a no-no, a taboo, disallowed. But we cannot keep it a taboo anymore. We have to talk about it. We have to talk about it among ourselves. We have to talk about it with our children, with young people. First of all, we need to tell them the desires that you have is very natural. It means that you are a healthy individual. You are very true to yourself. And that desire is not abnormal. It's not unholy. It is natural, and it's based on the design of God for us to be fruitful and multiply. How did the Old Testament people live with the law of God? It was easier at that time because people got married at a very early age. Women got married maybe 15, 16. You know, Rebecca, the wife of Isaac, she couldn't have been more than 15, 16 when she got married to Isaac. Isaac was much older. They had to because the average age was like 40 or 50. I mean, the age of the expected life expectancy was 40 or 50. So if you get married at the age of 40, you don't have many years to live as a husband or a wife. So people got married at a very early age. They didn't have anything else to do anyway. They didn't have university, and they didn't have to go to a city to look for a job and then come and get married. But now, people can't get married at the age of 14, 15, 16. It just doesn't work. They have to do so many things. They have to finish high school. They have to go to university, and men have to go to the army, military service, and then they have to get a job. Both men and women want to pursue their career, and then when they are ready, financially ready and psychologically ready, then they get married, and already they are past 30. So if we require people, you have to be chaste until you get married. Some people try very hard to keep it that way. They try very hard to live that way. We owe them all the admiration and respect. And there are many young people, many Christian young people who try to live that way. But also there are many young people who just can't do that. They just can't do that. What age do young people start dating? In junior high, high school. And they love each other, fall in love with each other, they spend time with each other. Anything can happen. We do not suggest that that is necessarily good. It is not good. Sexual relationship outside of marriage, before marriage, can create all kinds of problems, emotional problems, health problems, unwanted pregnancy, and unwed mothers, and all kinds of problems occur. And we already know many societies in the world where unwed mothers, when a young woman becomes an unwed mother, it just destroys her career opportunity. She can't go to school, she can't get a job, she can't get enough education to get a well-paying job, and she has to take care of the baby, and she's not ready to take care of the baby, and so the grandmother has to be involved, and all kinds of personal and social problems occur, all because they were sexually active before marriage. And so human beings already understand that there are consequences to their choices. There are consequences to their choices. We should not call those consequences God's punishment. That's too harsh. That's inaccurate. It's not a punishment from God, but nonetheless, there are consequences to our action. So if we are going to do something, we have to be ready to accept the consequences. If we are not ready to accept the consequences and yet go ahead and do something because we want to do it, we are being irresponsible, unwise, and we are playing with fire. But these considerations are common sense considerations. We shouldn't necessarily involve God in the picture and say, see, God is punishing you. God hates you because you broke God's law. God is against young people having sexual relationship. God is against sex. God is against all these things. We are taking God's name in vain. We are attributing to God things that prejudices and and unresolved questions that we have, our own conflict, our own prejudice, we are attributing them to God and say, God is against it. God is angry with you. God is punishing you. That's not true. That's not true. Any father, any mother who sees their children having a boyfriend or girlfriend and falling in love, parents will be worried. But parents will not judge them and say, oh, you're being a bad boy, you're being a bad girl. Oh, you're breaking God's law. God is going to punish you and send you to hell. That kind of father and mother is not being a good Christian and a good parent. They are not being a good parent. A truly parent who understands and loves his child will be concerned when their child is dating somebody, is getting close to someone. The parent will be concerned and wouldn't want their children to make mistakes, to do things they will regret later. I believe God has the same mind, same attitude. God understands human beings better than we understand ourselves. God knows what's in the heart of people. Do you think God will be shocked when He sees somebody looking at, for example, dirty pictures or, curious about sex? Do you think God will be shocked? Do you think God will say, oh, how can you? How could you? Oh, God forbid. Do you think God will do that? What kind of God do you think God is? God invented sex. God invented life, reproducing life. So, I think that young people who grew up in church are responsible for not knowing enough about God and the will of God and the mercy of God and the grace of God. Young people are responsible for not knowing God enough. If they knew God enough, they wouldn't just blame themselves. But they blame themselves and carry this guilt throughout their youth because they didn't know God enough. They didn't know Jesus enough. They didn't know the heart of God enough. They didn't know the grace of God enough. They just had an inkling. They just knew God superficially. And the superficial knowledge of God and Christianity produced guilt in their hearts. So, in the first place, their lack of knowledge produced this guilt, and because of this guilt, they move away from God. So they're making two mistakes. They're making two mistakes. Not knowing God enough and having guilt on account of not knowing God enough, moving away from God. So they are making two mistakes which can be avoided if they knew the grace of Jesus Christ, the love of God, and maturity that comes from faith and knowledge of God.